meeting starts.
Oh, that was much better. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Position of Neutrality. Welcome to New Freedom. We open every meeting of Position of Neutrality with a prayer, and Chaplain Lee is in the house.
Come on and stand to your feet all over this room. Father, we thank you on tonight. We welcome you into this place. Have your way on tonight. Speak through your manservant like never before. Enrich us with your knowledge, wisdom, and the understanding that we need to recognize that that's which is inside of us, the power that you have placed in us, Lord, is the same power that's going to keep us, same power that's going to lead us, same power that's going to guide us, same power that's going to remind us how it is that we've come this far. We thank you right now, and we ask you, Lord, to speak to the lives of each and every one that has walked in these doors tonight. Do what you do best. In the mighty name of Jesus, we thank you, and let all say amen.
Thank you, Chap. I appreciate that. Those of you that come to Chaplain Lee's Recovery Church service on Saturday, please remember that it's been moved to 7:30, and they are opening the doors at 6:45. And if you've never been to our Recovery Church service, please come check us out. Chaplain Lee has been ministering to men and women in prisons for 30-some years, yeah? So he sort of got the material down. How many of you have never been here before? Anybody? Oh, good. First of all, welcome. Thank you for coming out. Let us warn you in advance, you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. And the primary reason that's liable to happen is that we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do here, we've been doing for lots of years. We take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-Step Recovery. Why? Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, yes? And so what we do here is I attempt to show you how I find my experience in the book and encourage you to have your experience with the book. And if we both do our job, we share a spiritual experience in this room every time we come together. Any of you have been here before and can witness for these folks that happen? So for those of you that have never been here before, they're raising their hands. Those of you coming to us online, you can't see them raising their hands because of the anonymous nature of our fellowship. But they raise their hand to signify when we speak of spiritual experience in 12-step recovery, we're talking about a sensory experience. You will feel it. And when you do, I'll know, and I'll call it to your attention. Because we would cheat you to talk to you about the power we call God without giving you a demonstration of the power. The other thing we do, if you haven't been here before, is when I say God, you say, we had a whole crew hooting over here on the other side. Are they not here this week? The reason that happens is we know prejudice exists. Some people have had bad religious experiences. Some people have prejudice for other reasons. So we don't want anyone confused. We're talking about tangible sensory power in you. So when I say God, we're talking about the power in you. Does that make sense? All right, so tonight we're in step 4. Everyone just thinks that's just a real bummer, huh? Perhaps you haven't fully grasped the severity of your situation if step 4 is killing you. Yeah. Anybody had trouble launching out on a step 4 experience? Yeah. So don't be ashamed. Most people have had trouble with that until someone explains to them the why and the how, yeah?
I had trouble with the word vigorous.
I had trouble with pretty much all words. So we're on the bottom of page 63, and the authors share with us their experience. They say, next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. So the first thing we want to know is, who's the we they're talking about? The first 100. Now let's ask ourselves a question. How many of you have endeavored to do a fourth step at some point? Would you describe your first effort as something less than a launching?
Yes.
Okay, so something occurred for them that propelled them to launch.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you're not ready to launch on step 4, then it's not a step 9 problem, it's probably a step 2 problem.
Yep.
Because we haven't had our encounter. Because I'm not going to be able to enact a decision without power.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a simple fix, right? If we can just be honest with whomever is helping us. So then it says, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. So when did they talk to us about those things within ourselves that had been blocking us? In our step 2 encounter, the instructions, they said that we had been fooling ourselves, but deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, pomp, worship of other things, but in some form or other, it's there, right?
Yes.
So since I've agreed to that, and at some point I've felt the flow of this power, it would make sense I would now endeavor to start identifying these calamities, pomps, and worships, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then it says that our liquor was but a symptom. How many of you suspected that in your addiction, whatever it was you were chasing, was really a symptom of an underlying problem? And when you said that to people that didn't understand, they go, oh, no, you got a problem. You ever had anyone tell you you had a drinking problem or a drug problem? Did you think it was their attitude about your drug use that was really the problem? Yeah, because it wasn't the main problem. It was a symptom of an underlying problem. Yes? That unmanageability, that inability to engage constructively with others. Anyway, all right, so our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started on a personal inventory. So who's the we? So nobody has to do anything, but if you want what they have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. If you didn't launch, you're not ready. Let's tell us what we need to review.
Right.
Does that make sense? And now, if we're here, then let's look at what we got going on. So it says, taking a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. I know that was a lot, but we have to get through the entirety and then go back in and deconstruct it so we can see the instruction within it. Yes? So the first thing they told us is that this is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process, just like a commercial inventory. I don't want a bunch of broken goods on the shelf pretending they're not broken and then act like I'm mystified why I'm not selling very much.
Right.
And then it says, it's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. Do you notice how they said the truth?
Right.
They didn't say my truth, and they didn't say your truth. They said the truth.
Right.
How many of you have noticed there's sometimes a little difference between my truth about me, your truth about me, and the truth?
Yes.
So our effort is to narrow the gap between my truth, your truth, and the truth. And as we grow in this, we're going to find out that the truth has a name. Yes? Okay, so one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of them promptly and without regret. That's a tall order, isn't it? Yeah. How many of you discovered things in your personality that although some people found them offensive, you thought maybe perhaps they were assets? Any of you been sarcastic? I thought I was just full of wit. I thought that's what y'all were saying about me, too, but apparently I misheard you. I don't think they were saying wit, Carrie Ann. So we can't fool ourselves about the values in our life, and that's the whole point in the power greater in ourselves. We got to start looking at these manifestations of self that have kept me in a perpetual conundrum and let go of that and grow into something different. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So it says, if the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. So now I'm going to take a look at the course of my life, right? I'm going to look at people, institutions, and principles, and I'm going to look at how myself manifests based on that diagram that I've laid out. They're going to show me in a minute. So it says, first we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So they're about to lay out for me how I find the common manifestations of self and how they've defeated me, and they're going to lay it right out what they did, yes? Yep. So resentment's the number one offender. Yep. Any of you find yourself in early recovery and perhaps sometimes after a long time, a little restless, irritable, discontent? That's untreated alcoholism. Restlessness, irritability, and discontent, no matter how much time you have in abstinence, is untreated alcoholism. Does that make sense? It's a sign that I've allowed resentment to reside within me. Okay, so it says it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Some of you said that with, like, emphasis. So we've seen it, have we not? From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. How many of you still have a little trouble with the idea of addiction as a spiritual sickness? Some people do. If it weren't, why do I need a spiritual solution to straighten out what's going on within me? It's what they call alcohol, spirits, right? It's a synthetic spirit. And I absolutely had to have it to live until I found another power to live. Yes? So when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. We often, in modern treatment scenarios and beyond that, focus on the mental or the physical or both and neglect the spiritual, and we do that because we're afraid of telling people the truth. And as a result, our efficacy has fallen off like a rock over the years from the time these guys recorded that. So I encourage you not to leave someone else out there like that. We need to focus on the spirit first. Those physical things, those emotional things, they'll straighten out if we'll do this. Does that make sense? In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So the first effort to clean house is to write down those calamities, pomps, and worship, starting with my resentments. Does that make sense? We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Seems like a simple list, right? Isn't that what you used to do at the trap house or the bar? You just didn't write it down, you just shared it with your friend, right? We ask ourselves why we were angry. Self, why are you angry? Right? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. Did you find out that every time you got in a close relationship and you started exposing your humanity to them and they exposed their humanity to you, that all of a sudden you were having difficulties in personal relationships? Yeah, because they said that was one of the issues in 2, right? All right, so we're going to take a look at all those things in this inventory. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. It's easier, guys, I know people have told you this and you do it or you don't do it, but but it's easier if you do one line at a time, fill it all the way out instead of lineal columns. Get it all out about one situation and move through. Okay. So was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? So you understand what they're talking about. Self-esteem is simple enough. It's the idea I'd like to hold about me. Have you ever felt like somebody affected how you thought about you by the way they received you or did not? Okay. Our security. Our security may be threatened if our identity is placed in worldly things. So if I think that whether or not I'm with the right person or in the right job or whether I've got the right money, it can affect my security, can it? At least my sense of security. And then it says our ambitions. That one's a little trickier. That's my hope for a future outcome. How many of you have found it really difficult to celebrate the successes of your brothers and sisters because son of a bitch got my promotion? Or they're paying attention to him or her instead of me, or whatever. I'm unable to be joyful for anyone else's successes because I'm always feeling that I should have been considered. It's tricky, isn't it? Our personal or sex relations we don't need to get into. We'll get into later. How's that? All right. So they say we're usually as definite as this example. I'm not going to do all of that. I'm going to go to the bottom of that page. It says we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Why? Yeah, and we may not know. Our life depends on it when we start. But to Sean's point, the fact is I'm preparing a testimony of a victor rather than a victim. I'm going to spend the rest of my life giving credit to why these difficulties have been lifted from me and by whom they've been lifted from me. Yes? His power, His love, His way of life. Yes? So I want to get that right because that's the way when I'm giving credit and I'm moving in that direction, that's the way I keep the schemes off. Any of you ever been attacked in your mind? Doing everything right, and then all of a sudden something came into your thought life that told you nothing was right, and it was probably their fault, or maybe it's your fault. That won't be useful, right? All right, so when we were finished, we considered it carefully. Why'd they want me to be thorough and honest and then consider carefully whether I'd been thorough or honest? Yeah, and hadn't been terribly good demonstration of thorough and honest, have I? So I want to check my thinking both with somebody else and with myself at some point, yes? Not opinion shopping, just seeing what the heck where's my thought come from? Okay, so the first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. How many of you found that out in your inventory? I hope you did. Man, I've never been in a recovery room where someone wasn't harmed at some time in their life unjustly. They had no part in that harm. Some people horribly. So the world and its people are often quite wrong. Yes? So there's nothing wrong with that conclusion, but if I stay there, I stay there. So I got to move beyond that, don't I? So it says to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. Have you ever been there? You all right now? Oh, we got to help you. Don't stay in remorse. It's just the other side of the self line, right? Self-importance and self-loathing are still on the line of self. They're neither one going to help you. Okay, but the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. You ever done that? Fought with the idea you were holding and couldn't quite figure out you were fighting with an idea? The idea became your reality. No one else knew that was the reality you were living in. People trying to talk you out of it. That's not what's going on, but it is what's going on. Well, of course I can't win that battle, right? It's the thought's the problem, not my circumstance. All right, so as in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. We got to tell you, at this stage of your development, they're writing in past tense. It's plain now that they've done an inventory and are endeavoring to set right wrongs and are working with others. They wrote the book in past tense. So if it's not plain to you, it's because you're not far enough in your experience. That's when whoever's helping you is going to bear witness. I once thought and felt as you do, but I doubt I'd have made much progress had I not taken action. This is the action I took. This is what I experienced as a result. Does it make sense? Never telling them what they should do. Their faults are not discussed. That's why I had a whole fitness step to get to this point where I could dispassionately tell them of the redemption I've experienced and how I participated. Yeah? All right, so it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. So they gave you a little key to what delusion may look like in the addled mind. How many of you realize now that you had permitted all these things because of staying in a dark thought pattern, but at the time you did not know you were permitting it? You didn't like it? That's the very nature of delusion. I'm permitting it, but I didn't know I was permitting it. You don't have to be an addict to have that happen. The Eagles sang a song about that, right? So oftentimes it happens that I live my life in chains, and I never even know I hold the key. The heck do you think he's talking about? Okay. Yeah, the bondage of self. Exactly right. So, but with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it's fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. They're reiterating what I just told you about monitoring your condition. Yes? So if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Seems like a tall order when we're new or when we're mad or when we're not awakened sufficiently, yes? How many of you didn't even know how angry you were until someone reminded you how angry you were? They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. They've already told me how to differentiate. If I've got that phenomenon of craving, sets me apart as a distinct class. I'm the only one who knows. So other people can get away with that silliness. I can't, because I know myself to be this guy. Does that make sense? So it never has anything to do with how the rest of y'all are behaving. This is entirely about how I'm thinking, how I'm acting, how I'm emoting. We turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. So what's the key to the future? Well, it holds it, right? What's on the list? Yeah. Where's my people from that, students from that other book? The truth holds the key to the future. Yes? We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? They got a question mark. In this book, because it's basically an operator's manual for a very complex machine, the human, or at least the mind part, you got to ask yourself the question when there's a question, because eyesight without insight, spiritual blindness. So how could we escape, given that the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, could actually kill, and 98% of the stuff that I focus on as far as wrongdoing toward me was never aimed at me to begin with? Any of you ever thought someone wronged you when in fact they weren't thinking of you at all? Yeah, because I doubt any of you think of me as often as I think of me. And I have that in common with a lot of other people, right? What about the ones who really do harm us, slight us? If we hold on to it, it'll kill us too. because it shuts us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. So we got to learn to yield even to maltreatment and figure out how to be helpful. Tall order requires power greater than ourselves. Yes? Okay, so we saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? That'd be the next question, wouldn't it? How are we going to master resentments? No one's got an opinion? Let's see what the authors say. We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. So what did the authors suggest the first thing they tried to do? They tried to wish them away. And what did they tell you about wishing them away? We could not. How many of you tried to wish away your resentments? How many of you thought you had succeeded until you were reminded of them? So it says, this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. So we're starting to take a look at the world from an entirely different angle. Does that make sense? The whole purpose of the inventory is to open my eyes. So, though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. So what are their symptoms?
Resentment, fear, guilt, shame, remorse, same things I have.
You agree with them? Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, guilt, shame, remorse, all these manifestations of self that keep me in the bondage of self. And is it possible that if I'm in the bondage of those things, that other people I encounter are too? And is it possible I'm even seeing their plight, or am I just seeing my thoughts about them because it's so familiar to me? So we got some work to do, don't we? So here's what they said we did. We asked God, are we mesmerized or asleep? We asked God, we asked power to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. I'm going to need power to do that, especially when I'm easily offended. Yes? So when a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? Question mark. Starting in the journey. Self, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? It will never be the way I've traditionally handled it. They're not in need of a tune-up from me. I am perhaps the one in need of a tune-up, and they, because I can see their plight, when I offer them healing, I'll receive the one I need. But I'm going to have to remember what I'm doing, yes? All right, so it says, thy will be done. So what's God's will? For our purposes, whatever's going on, I need to get right-sized, right? There's God's will and my opposition to it. Yes? May not agree with that, but try it for a minute and see what happens. We avoid retaliation or argument. So they're telling you to get fortified, aren't they? We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. How'd they learn that? They did that. And my freedom comes from serving, not from judging. Right? So we cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. So that's the promise of an awakened spirit, is that I will be able to show patience and tolerance to each and every one, even if they don't respond. That's a goal, yes? All right, so referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Why'd they use that particular word? Resolutely. How many of you have been distracted by what they did to you, but you knew you had to let go of what you did to them? So it's going to take some resolve to let go of the slight and find your part, is it not? It's one of the reasons we suggest mentorship or sponsorship around here, because sometimes it helps to have someone carry that burden until we can air it, yes? All right, so where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. See how they're suggesting it wasn't an easy thing to do, but it was absolutely essential to get free. That's what we got to do. Okay, where were we to blame? Another question mark. Guys, you got to remember, no matter how bad they harmed you, if you somehow got the grace to get through it, you've got to find the power to forgive and use that experience to lift up another, because forgiveness is healing. Amen. Does that make sense? So, oh yeah, it's terrible. Unforgiveness is, and you'll suffer mightily from it. So the inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So something about the truth, when I admit honestly, then the truth sets me free, and I'm willing. Willing is divine power. Does that make sense? They talk to us clearly about if we lack willingness, we ask until it comes. They'll get more and more emphatic about that. Willingness is divine power. So I'm gonna, in order to get access to it, I'm gonna have to ask for it, and then I'm gonna have to act in it, and I'm gonna have to encounter this power at some point in order to carry that out, yes? All right, so notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches every aspect of our life. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we feel we didn't deserve, but did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. A lot of people don't do a lot of fear work, but all of us are driven by a certain amount of fear. And it's really good to see how fear manifests itself in yourself and understand how you think, how you emote, how you act as a result, because you'll recognize your symptoms sooner if you get a clear understanding of what's driving them. What they tell us back in step 3, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Notice how right after fear I experience self-delusion. I lie to me, I don't even know I'm lying to me. It's a very dangerous place to be. So I need to recognize the lie when my head starts talking. Yes? Okay. How many of you knew if you just would go do this, you could make a better life for yourself? Go back to school, do something like that. But the lie was, well, if I did that, it's going to take a long time. I won't have my degree for 4 years. Any of you ever do that to yourself? What happened after 4 years? Still right where you were. You still haven't got the degree you needed to go where you were going, right? So it stole an opportunity, and we often do different things, right? If I'm afraid you're not going to like me, I may present a guy that I hope you will like, and the likelihood is my inauthenticity, you're not going to like me anyway, but now I don't like me either. Any of you ever done that? Pretended to be something, and then it didn't work, and now it's, oh, screw me. Okay, so we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Guys, you may need to do a fear list in addition to your resentment list, which is going to chase you to the fear, because we do have fears that we've operated in all our lives that have caused us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve, and we haven't identified them because they don't have a resentment attached to them. How many of you were drinkers? Any of you like me who would sit in the bar night after night after night, close it when you're sick as a dog, maybe go outside and throw up a few times and go back because you just made more room? And there's no one at the bar but you, and you wouldn't leave because if you left, you might miss something. How many of you had trouble committing in personal relationships for the very same reason? So see, that's been driving me all my life, and I don't even know where it came from, but this fear I'm going to miss something has always got me out acting out of character. Yeah? How many of you have suffered depression? Okay, well, that's just anger without enthusiasm. So it's driven me inward to inactivity. And the only thing that's going to fix it is to move out, yes? Okay. So it says we ask ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Am I afraid to take this leap of faith and believe that I can move into a new manner of living and thus gain a whole new purposeful life because my past experience says I never follow through? Any of you had that fear? So this is why it's so important you understand this isn't a lifestyle based on self-reliance. It's not going to be like it's always been because I'm not going to be like I've always been. Does that make sense? Okay. Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So now they're clearly identifying my main problem is this fear, and it manifests in all these different ways, and I need to learn that that fear is a lie. Does that make sense? And that's not just a lecture or a quip or a bumper sticker. That's tangibly growing in the spirit so that I can move as indicated rather than be anchored to self. Yes? Because it's not always easy, is it? So perhaps there's a better way. We think so, for we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. It's sleeping on me again. We're relying on who? We're relying upon that power within us, yes? We trust infinite God rather than our finite self. We're in the world to play the role He assigns. How many of you have to admit there are times when it seems like we got dealt kind of a cruddy assignment? You ever had that happen? Any of you, no one but me, got the why me's? It's true sometimes we have difficult assignments, but we're asking the wrong question. Why me is the wrong question. Why not me? I have been perfectly prepared for this moment through every hardship I've been brought through. And I have a heart to serve. And every time I apply that heart to serve, I get another bump of the Spirit and I grow in my faith. So who better than me to take on the assignment that is my life? Who better than you to take on the assignment that is your life? And the answer is absolutely nobody, because by now we're growing in who we are and whose we are. Yes? Okay. So just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So all those situations where I need to find patience and tolerance and a good view of everyone, that's what they're telling me. I will get that power, philosophical comfort in the storm, just like they talked about. Does that make sense? Dude, I'm still human. I still think like Joe. You don't think people around here disturb me from time to time? Freaking all the time. But I'm still expected to act like a servant, am I not? And more as I grow in consciousness, I'm empowered to act kinder, speak kinder than I feel. And then I know the reality of God. Does that make sense? So, we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. So we got to grow up, don't we? Because if I'm going to give credit, just like the author said they did, His power, His love, His way of life, then I can't apologize to you for how you feel about my declaration. Because I'm not telling you what you must do. I'm just telling you that the one who did it for me sent me to you. And if you need anything close to what happened to me, walk with me, I'll show you. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it's the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. That's good. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. So a lot of times we get here and we think, what do I do? What do I do? And we start saying prayers because don't really have a prayer life that we understand. We say, what do I do? What do I do? And that's the wrong question. I'm not the doer. That's why they refer to me as a human being, not a human doing. So what I need to know is what he would have me be, yes? And then allow the doer to do what he do. You understand what I'm saying? There's a big command in another book that says, be still and know. And that doesn't mean just be quiet or stand firm. It also means know at your core that he is orchestrating everything around you for your benefit. So even if you're feeling disturbed in it, just be still and know. Does that make sense? Some of you, it's resonating with some of you, yes? Not, okay. That's the power we call God around here. When that happens, it happens in you. Okay. So instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. So be faithful, be loving, be kind, be tolerant, right? Those are the kind of answers I'm likely to get as I grow in the discipline. Yes? Now about sex. Uh-oh, they're heading for the doors. Many of us need an overhauling there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, the base necessity of procreation. And then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. Do either of those descriptions fit anybody? Do both of them fit some of us at different times? Yeah, that's why it's so difficult to manage as humans. Because depending on the nature of my current relationship or my current target, I may be completely on a different place. Yes? Have you ever been with one that you're kind of at the end of and procreation only? You ever been in a new and exciting one? There's not enough of it, not the right kind. Can we own that? Both sides? You're always trying to own our common humanity here, right? Because they're going to start telling us about what we ought to think about it and what we ought to do about it. And if we don't own our common humanity, we're going to think we're superior at times, and we're going to place ourselves somewhere we shouldn't be. They think we do not have enough of it or isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. I noticed that around here. Some of you guys have been inside for a long time. You see its significance everywhere. Not trying to make fun, I know, but it gets you in pickles, doesn't it? One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. Who's we? First 100. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. Who's the we? We all have sex problems. But they're the ones telling the story, aren't they? If I want what they have, and I'm willing to go to any length to get it, then I'm ready to take certain steps. And they all witness to one path. So I'm going to have to find common humanity, even with the most deplorable idea I have for a human, because I am no longer in service to the prosecutor. I am in service to the advocate. Does that make sense? Okay, so we'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? Anybody? Well, let's see what they did. We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Quit looking out into the world for a problem. The main problem centers in the mind. Quit looking out into the world for a solution. In the last analysis, deep down inside is the only place that he may be found. Does that make sense? That's what they witnessed to. So We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Now, it's not a check mark, guys. How was I selfish? What was I saying? What was I doing? How was I dishonest? And it's not enough that you were dishonest with everyone, because if you're anything like me, you always were dishonest with everyone. Sometimes you were dishonest, didn't even know you were being dishonest. But I had to tell me a lie before I mistreated you. That's what I got to identify. Does that make sense? All right, so, and then inconsiderate just means I never considered, and that's often how delusion starts running. Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Again, it's not enough to know that you did, because if you're human, you probably did, but we need to know how and what's going on in my thoughts and my emotions when that happens, yes? And my actions in that case. Where were we at fault? So they never leave us in the problem. They look at what kind of a place I'm now in because myself manifested. Does that make sense? What should we have done instead? How many of you know that if you do this thing and you realize that the answer of what you should have done instead becomes so plain, it's not so hard next time to admit powerlessness because you knew the answer, but you couldn't pull it off? We're going to need power to do that, right? I hear people all the time, just do the next right thing. Yeah, but I'm going to need power to do that. I have recognized the next right thing all my life before I screwed you. Anyone else? That's never happened? Come on, most of you guys came from the penitentiary, so I'm going to assume that you... we got this all down on paper and looked at it. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. So how many of you would like to have a future sex life? You always lie about that. They're like... Even those of you that are ashamed to say you'd like a future sex life, if you're going to have one, wouldn't you like to have a sane and sound ideal for one? Or do you just want to leave that in the shelf and try and hide behind, I don't really want one? It's about getting honest with yourself. I know nobody wants to raise their hand about a future sex life, but pretty much we discover most people want some kind of future sex life, and this is really about relationships anyway. And if you're going to interact with people, you're going to want a sane and sound ideal for all your future interactions. Yes? Okay. So we subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? How many of you were really good at convincing yourself that you really were a gift to him or her? So we're not always the best judge of whether it's selfish or not, but if we kick it down and it kicks back fast, that's an indication. Might want to run it by somebody, right? Okay. So we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Guys, by this time, if you're starting to understand that this tangible power within indeed answers these prayers and fulfills them in us, the more of this you do, even as silly as it may feel to you, I'm telling you, that is the key to the future. So we remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. Now, over the years, I've heard people point out the musts in this book, and I just want to tell you that must in the English language has more than one meaning. They've already told you this is suggestive only. So it's not a thou shalt. They're saying, now that your eyes are open, you've seen the harm that you've brought to yourself and others, you must be willing to continue growing. Right? They're just encouraging, never discouraging. Does it make sense? So it's not a law. It just makes sense. I'm starting to get free, and yes, it's hard, but I got power going with me. Yeah? We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm. Same thing. It's not always easy to go to people and tell them what we did and how we thought, right? But I've just gone through all this trauma, and if I don't continue, then I'm stuck where I was, which I already know is intolerable. So I must be willing, yes? Again, encouraging, never discouraging. All right, so provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other human problem. So don't get wiggy on the idea of sex relationships. It's all relationships. People, institutions, principles. And if you learn how to treat people, institutions, principles with kindness and grow in that discipline, then all this other stuff, it's all part of the same human experience. Does that make sense? So in meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. Which one? Each. Because I'm going to grow in practicing these principles in all my affairs. The right answer will come if we want it. Promise and condition. What's the promise? The right answer will come. What's the condition? If we want it. How many of you think because you don't want it, it doesn't come? If we don't want it, it'll still come. We'll just reject it. We'll think we can improve upon it. I'm a gift to her. It's so much better. So it's not going to work for me unless I honestly want to and I'm willing to make the effort. So it won't matter whether the right answer comes, because if I'm not really looking for the right answer and I'm just looking for my answer, then I'm probably going to get what I get. Any of you just wanted your answer and just searched out a committee to confirm it? Okay. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. So no matter how many consultations you do with humans, you're going to have to check it with the Spirit within you before you launch, because number one, you need the power, and number two, you're in the Spirit often asked to do things that other people will advise you not to do, and you're also often encouraged to do things that the Spirit tells you not to do. And if you want examples of that, how many of you found that things that enrage people no longer affect you in that way? And so people tell you, this is how you should handle that. You should call the police or go beat them up or burn their house down. And you're sitting there thinking, I don't want to. Denise and I had a dog, little tiny 30-pound dog, and we were walking her in the neighborhood one time, and a pit bull broke loose and just chewed her up, killed her, right? And it was sad. It was sad, and she lived for another week, and we were running her up and down to my brother, and all the time, all the people that knew Denise said, you should be angry. You should just go shoot that dog. She goes, oh, no, I'm not mad at the dog for being a dog. I feel terrible for that. I feel terrible for that woman who watched her dog kill my dog. I just want her to know that it's okay. Everyone that knew us told her she was crazy to have that attitude. But those of us in the Spirit knew she was not crazy to have that attitude. Am I making sense to you now? These are real, tangible experiences of responding appropriately when the world doesn't think my response is appropriate. If you don't think I know how to do that, I got a vision one time to start a reentry center. The world was wrong, yet here we are. Right? Okay. All right, so we realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Any of you have been afraid that you needed to be perfect in order to continue? We need to lose that, right? So does this mean we're going to get drunk? So some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. Depends on us and our motives. And again, as you're growing in the Spirit, check your motives in the Spirit, because I had a motive to get sober long before I could manifest any outward action to show it. I had a motive to stay sober long before I could manifest any outward action to show it. Does that make sense? So my motives are going to need to be empowered, is what I'm trying to say. All right, so if we're sorry for what we've done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven, we'll have learned our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing, these are facts out of our experience. A lot of people get troubled because of modern therapeutic methods that tell us we got to just forgive ourselves. And I suggest to you that humans aren't any good at divine acts. So we say things like, I forgive, but I don't forget. And in fact, that's our lived experience. The reason they learn to ask power for that forgiveness is because as a recipient of forgiveness, I'm a distributor of forgiveness. Does that make sense? It's a logical approach. Anyway, so to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for strength to do the right thing. See how we're preparing to start moving in clear thinking, thinking of others, at least as much as I'm thinking about me, and then power to do what's indicated, yes? If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. How many of you are blessed with a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps in working with others? Okay. So the rest of you will be raising your hands soon if you want to get well, because it's not a rule. That's how we get the healing, is by being instruments of the healing. This whole place was set up on the AA's model. Instead of an alcoholic properly armed with the facts about himself can win the confidence of another within a few hours or whatever, we just substituted an inmate. And the whole place is set up on AA's model. And so no one got here unless they could tell us what they were doing to serve others in there. Yes? And when you got here, it didn't do you any good to tell us what we could do for you. We wanted to know what you could do for us. Yes? Not for us, because we provide everything, but for your fellows. Yes? Okay. All right, so we think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. If you don't believe that, guys, the next time you're really disturbed, instead of going and talking about it, find somebody you know needs a little lift and go help them. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we've written down a lot. We've listed and analyzed our resentments, and we've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. Notice how they're talking about beginnings. Don't stop at a 4th step. Don't stop at a 5th step. Don't stop at a 9th step. We're growing. We're coming to believe, and all these are valleys and hills that we must overcome in that coming to believe process. Yes? So we have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. What did? Faith. Faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope that you're convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you've made a good beginning. That being so, you've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. See you next week.